Hi, my name is Andrew Spieler, and I was the first assistant director for RocketJump the show on Hulu. And we're going to talk a bit today about how to break down a script. This approach is something that is typically done by the first AD, but I'll tell you, if you're a director and you want to be a good director, this is something you should do too. It really applies to the creative process and to understanding what's on the page versus what's in your head and how to properly communicate that with all of your departments to really make the most of your directorial skills on the day. By the end of it, you will really know your script inside and out, and every good director and every good first AD should know that way in advance. The most important part about breaking down a script is essentially being organized. As you can see on the table here, for educational purposes, we have mapped out our elements of a script to a color. And we pulled these off of a software called Final Draft, which is sort of a standardized screenwriting software that comes with an additional piece of software called Final Draft Tagger. Tagger is essentially a way to go in and do what we're about to do physically in a software sense. You can feel free to use whatever colors you want when you're breaking down your script, as long as you've assigned a value for them and you know what that value is. So just real quick, these are some of the elements that you're going to be looking for that most of the time you're going to find in any kind of a script. Obviously, if you're doing a special genre script that has an element that's not on this table, you just add it and assign a color to it. You may not need some of these, and that's fine, but it's good to sort of have a sense of what you're looking for initially as you go through. And we're going to use High Plains Drifter, as you may remember from the show, as the example today. So we'll start breaking this thing down. All right, let's get into it. So, scene one. Once you jump in here, you've got your scene heading, you've got your action description, and then you've got all of your dialogue and description in between dialogue here. And as you can see, scene one starts on page 1 and ends on page 2. And you determine how long a scene is by breaking it up into what we call eighths. Now, eighths essentially are eighths of a page, where you take the ruler, and as you're going through into about 8 lines, so that's about what it would look like. So the reason we use eighths is because it gives us just that much more detail and specificity on how long a scene is according to the page. Because if you just did a page and a half, that would be a scene larger than what this really calls for. So to be able to say that this is a page and 2/8 allows us to know that it's a little more than a page, but it's not huge. And as you can see here, the last 2/8 are just an extra line of dialogue. So really, it's a scene that would last for about a page or so. And as you go on, you'll kind of just sort of get used to this. Your eye will become trained to looking at a script and quickly saying, oh, this page is, or the scene rather, is 2 pages and 3/8, or oh, this is a 4-page and 1/8 scene, that kind of thing. But these page numbers and the page count are very important, and you want to keep a log of them for each one of the scenes on your side note paper. So now, this is where the color comes in. So you'll see here we have our first character introduced in the first line of action, Sally Westfield. So we'll grab our cast members line here, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and underline Sally Westfield with blue. Okay, so we have a bar of a Western saloon. So right away, I know that that means that we're going to have some serious set dressing that's going to be time period based. So I'm going to go ahead and take my green set dressing pen and underline bar of a Western saloon. Because I know that a bar needs bottles and glasses and bar stools, and they might also need bar patrons. So, yet again, I'm going to take my extras marker, and I'm going to go ahead and underline that light green with the dark green to remind me that I need to ask and see if we need to also have extras in this bar. And then there's another character here called the bartender. The bartender pours her another. So it's not a specific prop, but it's clear that the bartender is going to be pouring something into Sally's glass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take props, and I'm going to go ahead and just underscore pours another. As far as props go, props are anything that any of the characters interact with physically. So there, I'm going to make a little note and say, okay, the bartender needs a bottle and Sally needs some kind of a glass. And we also want to define what kind of glass and how many times are we going to pour, and do we need resets, and is she going to drink this glass, and if she does, what's going to be the fluid in the glass. So as you can see, it goes down to a very finite level of information that you need to get to and almost sort of decode what's on the page. So right away, here's only 1/8 of a page, and we've already discovered that there's quite a bit of elements and stuff that we need to discuss and talk about and figure out in more detail. Bartender, say sheriff, ain't you got a race coming up? Sally looks up, angry. Sally, not anymore. Sally slams back her scotch. So, slams back her scotch. Slams is in all caps, and slams could mean a sound, or it could just be the action of what she's doing. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and note that as a potential sound, that we're going to see her take her drink, slam it back, and slam it back on the table. And her scotch. So that's also a prop, because she's clearly going to be drinking it. She reaches into her pocket for a flask and takes a pull from it. Costumes, orange. So her pocket means that whatever she's wearing needs to have a pocket for the flask to slide into. Now, this may seem very detail-oriented, but these are the kind of things that when you sit down and talk to a director about, they might say, oh, they don't need a pocket. She can just pull it out of anywhere. And I'd rather her not actually have pockets. So that was really more of something that the writer came up with, but not something that the director is going to actually use. So then you want to make sure you go and communicate that with costumes. And then costumes goes, oh, good, because I was going to get a thing with like 8 pockets on it. But if he doesn't want pockets, I want 2 pockets. So little hints like that are very important. You obviously have another prop. It's a flask, which we find out later the flask takes a bullet and saves Sally's life. So you know you're going to need 2 versions of that flask, a clean one and one with a bullet in it. So again, later on, as I go through the script, I'd be making a note saying that we need to have 2 versions and make sure that we have the right one on the day that we're shooting the scene. Sally looks toward the saloon's door. We see Hayward, an obvious bad guy who kind of looks like an oil tycoon, flanked by like 2 of his cronies. So what I would do is I would take the green and I would highlight 2 cronies. But then as I go through the scene, I notice that one of those cronies has a line of dialogue. It says, crony, yeah, Sally, misplace your horse, haha. Which means that now one of the cronies is background and the other crony is an actual principal character. So I'll underline the crony here that has the line of dialogue, and I will go back here and I'll make a second marking with the blue under the green, under cronies, to remind myself to go in and discuss which crony is going to be a principal actor and which one is background. Or if they are both principal actors and the second crony just hasn't spoken yet. Saloon doors. So that would also be most likely a prop and a set dressing, because it's going to be inactive, but they might have saloon doors that swing, so the actor's going to be interacting with it. So does that fall in set dressing, locations, or props? That's one of those things that you got to kind of go and check and see who's going to be responsible for it and exactly what's going to be happening with those doors. He produces a piece of paper with deed to the town, props. The entire saloon laughs. Okay, so this is again going to be extras. We have to figure out how many saloon members there are, and laughs is going to be sound. Exactly who's laughing and how many are laughing is actually an important detail that you want to ferret out. So we're going to jump ahead to a couple of different scenes that have some unique elements to them, just so you can get a sense of what else might be a stunt or a special effect. And there were plenty in High Plains Drifter, so we're going to take a look at those. In scene 4, Sally opens the door to her house, raising her oil lantern, obviously a prop. Sally sees her entire family has been shot and are dead, face down in their soups. Now, that may seem like a simple enough description, but there's actually a lot to be mined from this. How many people are in her family? If they're shot and dead, are we seeing blood? If they're face down in their soups, are their faces submerged in liquid, which would actually be a stunt, especially if we have kids on set who need to put their face in water. And most ADs will tell you that a stunt is anything more than a walk. And maybe we're running someplace that's got gravelly stone and it's actually harder to run than you realize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put face down in their soups as a stunt. And I'm going to go ahead and take special effects and put that under been shot and dead. Just in case there's any kind of a blood gag or special effects makeup that we need to worry about. And usually what I do too is I'll also list makeup with any kind of special effects makeup type work. Because you could have somebody who's been shot and is dead and have them have a blood gag, which would technically be special effects. But if you want them to look dead and drained, that would be makeup. So therefore you want to make sure you know who's doing what and covering your bases during your breakdown so that you know that you need to define which department's going to be handling what element. Here we have a cavalry saber. It says Sally catches up to the female crony of Hayworth's. The two of them bump each other for a bit until Hayworth's crony produces a cavalry saber and swats at Sally with it. Sally dodges to the side and holds on for dear life, barely clinging onto the side of her horse. She opens the saddlebag and produces a whip. Now, not only is this a major stunt, but also involves animals doing a stunt, and stunt riders and weapons. So something we also don't have here, I believe, in the element breakdown, which I usually do make, is a list for prop weapons, or just weapons in general. Technically, they would fall under props, but I usually categorize them into a special prop category, because on larger shoots, props are not going to be responsible for any weapons or guns. It's going to be a weapons wrangler. So in this case, I will use the black, and I'm going to underline cavalry saber and whip. And I'm going to put a star next to these. So that way I know when I'm going back through that we really need to talk about the saber, and if it's going to be rubber, or if it's going to be real, or if it's going to be plastic, what it does, how it's being held, how it's coming out, if it's got any kind of a sharp edge to it. And then same thing with the whip. How long is the whip? Does it really need to actually whip onto the saber? Is that going to be a special effect? Where is the whip going to be on the horse? All these sort of questions have to come up and be answered before you step on set, because if you're figuring that out on set, it's already too late and you're going to burn a lot of time trying to come up with how it's going to work. If you're doing something, say like a feature or a short that has more than one story day in it, you want to go through and define for yourself at which scenes the story days start and then where they end. And what you'll do is you'll have your story day list, and then you're going to want to go ahead and run it and cross-check it with your other departments. You want to check with costumes, and you want to check with makeup and see if they have different story days or if they have multiple looks for a given character within the same story day. Die Hard is a really good example of this. His white shirt that Bruce Willis wears at the start of the film to the end has multiple stages, and even though the whole film takes course over one night, the costume department had very particular looks of dirtiness and actually had different shirts that weren't white anymore. They were like gray, so that as the character progressed and the arc progressed, so did what he was wearing, which gets to be the really fun part of storytelling when you start using these elements to your advantage to convey story and character. So there is a level of creative liberty as you're doing this process. It's not all tedious. It's really thinking about what's happening in the scene, and again trying to read between the lines and making notes about it to bring up to make sure that you've talked about it before you get there. So once you've done all of this, you will then move into creating something that looks a little more formal, and you can get these, you can download a breakdown sheet, and once you've inputted all of this information into a computer, it'll spit it out and give you a nice clean text format, and you can do it by department. And it's a really great way to just sort of check and double check with all the departments to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because again, it always goes back to communication of crucial information. So I hope that this was helpful. There's no right or wrong way to go about how to break down a script as long as you're thorough and detailed with it. And that's something that will lead into the scheduling process, which will be done in another video. Have fun, be safe, and good luck.